This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about when you get injured or sick on your pool route, and I'll go over some of the injuries that I've suffered, and I'll go over steps you can take when you're sick or injured on your pool route, and some things to consider going forward at this point. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. For me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. This is something that you may think about once in a while, or you may not think about it until it happens. It is something that I want to put on your radar because it could happen at any moment. An accident could happen. I've had things happen to me where I just wasn't focused and not thinking, and as a pool pro, we're kind of going through the day, sometimes on autopilot in some cases, which can be dangerous, but it can happen. So I'm not talking about a car accident, although that can happen. My repair guy that I use a lot was in a pretty bad car accident in the rain, and he was out of work for a couple of months, and now he won't work when it's raining, which is kind of smart, I think, in his case, but it makes sense that he's a little bit paranoid about driving in the rain, because driving generally in California is dangerous. I'm not sure what it is, but there's a segment of people that are driving like so fast out there, and another segment that are driving distracted, another segment that only drive their kids to school and back home. And so the suburbs are extremely dangerous out there anyway, and I've almost been hit a few times. I've actually been pretty lucky out there as far as dodging accidents, and I've dodged a few accidents myself. I even dodged a truck that ran a red light, a big rig truck, on a side street. Luckily, at the corner of my eye, saw him coming through the red light, and it was red for a long time, and there was actually cars stopped in the other lane, which is weird, and I was fortunate enough to see him out of the corner of my eye and stop, and he went through the intersection. That would have been pretty bad at that point, but those accidents sometimes are unavoidable, and you can't get injured in them. But most of the accidents that I'm talking about here are the accidents I've had out in the field or injuries. So the one that was the worst for me, and this is something that I just wasn't thinking as well. It was kind of drizzling out. It wasn't really raining, and I was working. And I was on my back bumper reaching up for a case to get a gallon of acid out. And I slipped, and the side of my side hit the bed of my truck, the tailgate that was raised. I didn't have the tailgate down. I was kind of lazy and trying to reach in and grab it. And so I fell and hit that. I didn't think anything of it. It hurt pretty bad. Kind of knocked the wind out of me. But when I was at the pool and I was bending down to do the water testing, I just felt something weird, like my side caving in when I kneeled down. And I was like, well, this is probably not a good thing. So I just kind of cut my day short and drove home. And I was fine until a few hours later when I was trying to take a deep breath, and I realized that I couldn't really get a deep breath. And my wife was like, well, you probably broke your ribs. That's what it feels like or sounds like. And sure enough, that's what had happened. And believe it or not, you're not supposed to wrap the ribs anymore. I think that's against the way they do it. But she wrapped my chest really well. And then I actually went to work the next day, and I couldn't bend over well. I couldn't do much except check the chemicals. And this actually was how it was for about 2 weeks. I couldn't do much physically. Net the pool maybe, check the chemicals, and I let any customer know that complained, and actually no one complained about it. So that was a good thing as well. But I let everyone know that I was injured and they were fine with it. So I think that's step number one, is to communicate that you're injured. You can't do the full service of the pool like you used to. Customers can be very understanding, and I think all of them, I don't think anyone complained about, any kind of problems or any kind of issues with me just doing chemicals only at that time for those 2 weeks. And it was fine. Luckily it wasn't in the middle of summer. It was beginning of summer. It was around April, I believe, when that happened. That's why it was kind of misty out. And one of the things that you need to do is just communicate that you're hurt. And if you have to miss some days, if you do service the way I do it, or a lot of people do it this way as well, is that there's actually bonus days built in to the months. If you look at maybe the month, let me look at a month here. I'm going to just pick the month of May here. So May is actually pretty decent. There's 5 Thursdays and 5 Fridays in there. And so you have 5 Fridays and 5 Thursdays, and you only charge monthly. So you have extra days. And so typically in the calendar year, every stop is going to have 4 extra stops that they're not being charged for, because you're billing at a monthly cycle and the month is not even. If you there's a calculation of 4.3 that's used in a lot of industries. 4.3 is actually a more accurate estimate of things than 4. But in the pool service industry, we're just doing 4 weeks of service, 30-day monthly billing, and there's actually extra service days, and that equates to 1 full month. And so you can actually take some sick days if you need to, and take those days off if you're really injured or sick. So keep that in mind, that if you do monthly billing, you have built-in extra days. And if the customer questions you on it, just let them know that you can explain it to them. You can actually take a physical calendar, which I like to use, by the way. I don't like the phone. Just have a physical calendar and show them, look, this month has 5 Thursdays, so you have an extra service day that I don't charge you for, that I'm going to keep in my pocket for a vacation or when I'm injured or hurt. And they understand that. If you can explain that to them, they'll understand. But I think, again, the first step is communicating that you can't do the full service of the pool. Now, what if you're injured to a point where you can't clean the pool? Now, this happened to a friend that I know, that he broke his hand, and he broke his whole arm, and he couldn't service the pool. He couldn't even drive to the account. So what he did is he hired his nephew to go out there with him. He trained him really fast to kind of do the minor stuff, and he went out there with him, and he coached him, and he did the things he could do with one hand, and he kind of did that for about 6 weeks or 8 weeks of his route, and that's perfectly fine as well. So number 2 is have somebody that you can rely on that can go out there and help you. Now, a lot of people will maybe use another pool pro, but they can't do 6 weeks or 8 weeks with you. So it's a good idea to find somebody, or have somebody in your family or a friend that you can actually recruit if you need to. And there's always somebody, maybe someone who's retired, who needs extra work, or just a young kid like this situation with his nephew. There are situations where you can find somebody to do that. You can join something like HASA, where they have sick route coverage, but that's very limited. So they're not going to do 6 or 8 weeks. They will cover your route in certain situations for a small amount of time, and you have to also do route coverage yourself. So keep that in mind as well. So I always think that it's good to have, somebody that you can rely on in the family, or a friend, if that were to happen. Now, of course, you want to try to prevent that from happening, and a lot of this can be prevented just by being careful. I remember another buddy of mine, he was walking around, he took the skimmer lid off, and he was walking around the pool not really paying attention. Not sure why he left the lid off, but a lot of injuries happen when you step in the skimmer with the lid off. Believe it or not, a lot of pool guys break their ankle or could get hurt pretty badly when they do that, because we're kind of, again, on autopilot walking around the pool, and we're assuming that the skimmer lid is on. And if we take it off without really being cognizant of what we're doing, because again, a lot of this is repetitive. You do the same thing over and over again. And so in your head, you're just kind of like working on this kind of image of the pool and not really there present, if that makes sense. And he stepped inside the skimmer and twisted his ankle really bad and got hurt. That was very preventative. That was very preventable, I should say, if he were aware of the danger of that. And I'm very aware of that, because I've almost done that a couple times myself. That's why one of the things that I'll do at a pool, if I'm not going to be vacuuming the pool and using the skimmer, which I don't do very often, if I do use the skimmer with my manual vacuum, I'll go over the deck into the skimmer. I won't go through the weir gate area. I'll actually take the vacuum hose and go over the top. And I've been questioned on that by people. They're like, hey, why do you go over the top with the vacuum hose and don't put it through the weir gate? Well, one reason, and the main reason, is a safety reason for myself, because if the pool hose is in the skimmer and I step on it, I'm not going to hurt my ankle because it's blocking the hole. And that's why when I vacuum a pool, I go over the top of the deck. Good idea to train your employees to do the same thing. Instead of putting the vacuum through the weir gate, go over the top of the deck, and that way the skimmer hole is kind of protected with the vacuum hose. It really doesn't affect the vacuuming at all, and I find it to be a good safety measure out there. But that's why when I'm not vacuuming the pool, I won't check the skimmer basket until I'm almost done with the pool, and then I'll check the skimmer basket in a lot of cases because I don't want to step in there and get hurt. So that's preventable. Other things that can be prevented, I've had a pretty bad slip where I sprained my ankle, and I actually had to limp through a week of service with it. And it was my fault because the equipment was downhill, the ground was wet and muddy, and I'm thinking, well, I can handle this little slope. It's not a big deal. But physics took over. I slipped on the mud, fell down. No one saw me, thankfully. And I sprained my ankle pretty badly. Again, very avoidable because I should have known that, the wet mud and me stepping on it at an angle of, 90 degrees is going to take me out. So you learn those lessons the hard way. And I've also banged my head on a low tree branch. This happened because I wasn't paying attention again. I had my straw hat on, which obstructs your view, by the way, somewhat. So if you do wear a straw hat, realize that some of the view around you is going to be obstructed by the straw hat. It's just the way it's designed. I like it because it covers your whole face, covers your neck, but there is kind of some blind spots with it. One of the blind spots was a tree branch that was in front of the equipment, which I knew was there because I've serviced that pool forever, but I just was again on autopilot, hit my head, and I had a pretty good concussion, I think, but I'm kind of used to being hurt, I guess, and so it didn't bother me that much, and I worked the rest of the day, and then I worked the next day. I didn't do the NFL concussion protocol and took a week off, but I just went out there and kept working. So, of course, I'm just going over stuff that can be prevented out there by just being kind of aware. I've had other pool pros that I know that have fallen into an empty pool while they're doing an acid wash. They weren't careful. They were trying to step into the pool kind of awkwardly and fell and, got injured slightly there. But anything major, of course, try to have a backup plan and find somebody that can go out there with you if you're really injured, because the route coverage is not going to cover you for that much of an extended period of time. I know some guys that have taken their spouse out there with them when they got injured. I mean, that's not a last resort. That's actually pretty good sometimes. And your spouse is actually sometimes better at customer relations than you are. And, they're talking to the customers and you're trying to do the best you can living through your day. And that's also something that you may want to consider. Although my wife would probably never go out. She doesn't like the sun. So that's something that it's, person dependent, I guess. Now, when you're sick, here's something that you have to consider as well. Kind of use those sick days because you may even kind of make yourself worse by going out there when you're sick. And I've been sick with the flu before where I'm trying to work through it with the flu. I have a fever of like 102, 103. You just can't work. You can't focus. And you're not going to get better unless you're getting rest. So I recommend that when you're really sick and, if you have the COVID or the flu, don't go out there and struggle through it. Try to get some rest so you can recover because you're only going to get sicker. Your body is not going to recover. You really need your rest. So use those sick days when you need to, when you really are sick. When I'm just kind of somewhat sick, I'll go out there and work, and it's not a big deal. It doesn't bother me to work when I'm got a runny nose or if I have a cold. I just go to work, not a big thing. And you're not in an office around somebody and you're not going to spread it to people. So definitely, if you're really sick, take those sick days. And if not, I just limp through the day. It's not a big deal to me to clean a pool when I have a cold. Here's a side note if you have employees. So if you have a 1099 employee, which they're not super prevalent in California because it's pretty much illegal to have a 1099 worker. So we have only employees here in California mainly, and those employees should have workers' comp. A lot of people skip on the workers' comp because they feel like they don't want to pay that. The good thing about pool service is that we're actually in the janitorial category, so the workers' comp is a little bit less than construction. And I would recommend it because I've had pool guys that have gotten in trouble and have been threatened to be sued by employees that got hurt where there was no workers' comp. And I do know pool employees or pool service employees that have been hurt and have made workers' comp claims because of their injury. So that is something to consider with an employee having the workers' comp. So if they get hurt out there on the job, at least they get something and you're covered as well because you have workers' comp, which is, I believe, required in most states. At least it's required here. So don't skimp on the workers' comp. Maybe raise your rates by $5 a pool or $3 a pool to cover the cost of the $300 or $400 a month workers' comp fee for the employee. But you really need that. Unfortunately for yourself, you don't have that luxury of having the workers' comp. And it's one of those things where if you get hurt, and by the way, if you're like me and you have really terrible insurance, I have Covered California. It's kind of like the state insurance here. It's a long story of what happened here in California. But my insurance is terrible. I mean, I have to pay a huge deductible, I think, before anything, like $7,500. And so if I get hurt and go to the doctor, I pay for everything out of my pocket. And then there's like a 30% copay at the hospital up to a certain amount. I haven't looked at the policy, but I think up to like $15,000 or something. So it's really bad. And so I'm extra careful because I have really bad insurance and I want to make sure that I don't get hurt and have to use it. So I don't do anything crazy like play sports or play adult softball, anything that's going to get you hurt. I don't ski anymore. So all those things are gone because I just don't want to get hurt. And it's just like, kind of think of yourself as like an NFL player. In their contract, there's a lot of stipulations about what they can do outside of off the field. A lot of them are banned from playing baseball or doing other things that they can get hurt doing. And so kind of get that mentality that, okay, if I have activities outside of the pool service, one thing that comes into mind is T. Dula. He's the guy that makes the service cart. Sam is his name. He rides these dirt bikes and he goes out and does the jumps and all this stuff. To me, that's crazy, but he doesn't have an active route. But he just popped in my head because he's one guy that I know that has a pretty dangerous hobby. But those things probably should go away at some point so that you can avoid injury and you can focus on your business because you are it basically in a lot of cases. If you have an employee, they can probably cover and help. And that's something I didn't talk about too much, but an employee can cover part of your route to some extent. But really, it's one of those things where you just want to avoid being hurt. And if you do get hurt, you want to have some kind of backup plan. And you want to make sure that you can at least talk to the customers and let them know that for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to just do as minimal service as I can because I'm injured. And most people will understand that. But it's kind of one of those things where it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to say this, but avoiding injury is probably the best way to manage being hurt on your route. And I think that's true. Just be careful out there. Don't do anything crazy. And don't be on autopilot too much while you're walking around the service account because you can get hurt. And it's hard not to do, of course, because, again, the repetitiveness of this business can kind of turn your brain off. So avoid that and, take precautions while you're working out there. If you're looking for the podcasts I recorded, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon, and I have over 1,600 podcasts for you there. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.